Did you hear that? That is the sound of fan service, of reverence to Final Fantasy and its fans. Eternal Wind is just one of the many beautiful pieces from FF14. But, as I'm sure many of you will know, it is far from new. It is in fact older than me. It's older than Matt. It comes from Final Fantasy III, 1990. It was used as the overworld theme, and it sounded a bit more like this. Today's video is all about the Final Fantasy games that inspired Endwalker especially, and Final Fantasy XIV generally. And of course that does mean we are going to be wading into spoilery territory for a few things. And I'm not going to spoil myself. In fact, I'm not allowed to see the rest of this script. He's not let me. So I'm going to see you at the end. I'm going to leave this one up to Matt.
Eternal Wind evokes an old-school sense of adventure, but you can also hear just a little tinge of loneliness throughout, almost as if to adventure means to leave something behind. That's a theme that we see often in 3, but also every time the track plays in 14, you kind of feel it. The Crystal Tower, where the song actually is used in 14, also comes straight from FF3, as does many of its characters and its themes. For a quick plot rundown, Doga and Une, who are affiliated with Noah, help the Warriors of Light enter the tower to defeat Sande, and then the Cloud of Darkness. On the way up the tower, we fight clones of Doga and Une, and ultimately we enter the World of Darkness at the end. That's true of both games, like literally, it's not the full story of them, of course, but as a synopsis, it is literally true for both games. In 14, of course, the tower means so much more. It's the tale of the Elegant Empire, the precursor to Dalamud, the Empire's ultimate downfall, and it bears witness to the Epic of Grahatia. They yoinked the idea from 3 straight up, but they made us love it for entirely new reasons. And the inspirations from 3 don't end there. There's Eureka, the Forbidden Land, which was first featured in FF3 as basically a big loot cave, but it was much different when it arrived in Stormblood, as I'm sure you're aware. More importantly though, Light and Darkness got some real love in FF3. So the heroes of FF3 have to deal with the aftermath of the Flood of Darkness. That's kind of the plot. Of course, it's a less literal version than what actually happened on the 13th Reflection that we know of, but it was still more darkness than light, that's the point. In 3, the party then later learned it's not about good or evil or anything, but it is balance. And long before they took up the Warrior of Light moniker, the Warriors of Darkness existed and they had to deal with the Flood of Light way in the past, just like what happened on the first. Back then, that was a novel counterpoint to the very simple, the light is always good trend of FF at the time, and it clearly inspired Ishikawa whenever she was writing the Crystal Tower and the Shadowbringers quests. In fact, it might be honestly fair to say that Shadowbringers is basically the FF3 expansion. That's what it is. All of those themes that they touched upon so briefly back in 1990, they were revived and expanded upon. Adventure, sacrifice, what it means to be a hero, and really, light and darkness being so much more complicated than we first think. So, what comes after Final Fantasy III? Well, with zero irony, the next step is Final Fantasy IV. We got the Lunar Whale as a FanFest mount, Meteor got a job change from Dark Knight to Paladin in the trailer, and obviously we're going to the moon. So we figured it's time to do some speculation. We can start with Meteor's job change actually. In FF4, Cecil begins the game as an accomplished Dark Knight. We watch him commit an atrocity in Mysidia in the name of his king, one of many, but he begins to have doubts. Those doubts ultimately prove true, which leads to a change of heart from him. But later, when he returns to Mysidia, that past entirely catches up to him. He can no longer proceed until he renounces that past, so he and his companions, who at the time includes a set of young sorcerer twins, one male, one female, the only difference is their colour, they journey to the top of Mount Ordeals to find him a new weapon. Ultimately, he leaves his Dark Knight greatsword behind and claims the Sword of Legend. Cecil faces his past, he accepts it, and he wholeheartedly becomes his new self, this ideal of a stalwart paladin. For the Warrior of Light, becoming a dragoon was thematic during the Dragonsong War in Heavensward, and then becoming a monk and a samurai during the Stormblood trailer celebrated those nations' histories quite well. But Shadowbringers was different. Picking up the Dark Knight's greatsword signified becoming the Warrior of Darkness, which was core to so many of the themes of Shadowbringers and so much to the idea of who we actually were as characters. So you have to wonder, is changing to Paladin just this cute little reference to Cecil, or is it something more? Thinking about everything so far and what the job change actually meant to Cecil, I have a fairly good idea. I believe it represents strength, purpose, and conviction. Like with Cecil after Mount Ordeals, The Warrior of Light seems to harbour no doubt and stands completely strong. If you don't really believe me, you can pay attention to the difference in these trailers. In most of them, when he faces an enemy, he has to put up a fight. But when you watch Endwalker a couple times, like we've been doing, he's completely unassailable. He leaps in to aid Alizé exactly when he needs to, and then the first beast on the moon, which is a literal dungeon boss from Amarot, goes down in just one clean swing. So the Warrior of Light becoming a paladin, I think, is just that ideal. The ideal of being a paladin, that we're standing our ground, standing strong, and basically finishing the fight. But that's only one thing from FF4. What else is there to glean from it? Well, most importantly, I think it's the Lunarians. They're the race of ancients who are sleeping on the moon and waiting for their time to reclaim the world as their own. The Ascians' consistent appearance on the moon in 14, as well as Zodiark being either in the moon or actually being the moon himself, that all lines up a little bit too well with the Lunarians, especially Zemus. That's the evil Lunarian from 4, who wanted to retake the world by force, but was sealed on the moon in order to protect us. There's also Kane Highwind from 4, the character who laid out what a Dragoon truly was to FF players. A little edgy, a little tormented, but ultimately a dependable ally. With all that in mind, Estinian waiting until now to join us doesn't feel like a coincidence. I think they have a very specific plan for him. And then, of course, there's the Tower of Zot, which is the dungeon in the Mediator. In 4, that was Golbez's base of operations. But the thing about Golbez is, while he was an antagonist, of course, he wasn't actually the true villain. He was actually being tempered by Zemus, the evil moon person. Now, Golbez himself doesn't seem to appear in the game, but we do get to hear a great arrange of his battle theme, which means there's a chance we get to hear Soken's take on the theme of love. Now, that's such a beautiful bit of music that it's actually in the Japanese curriculum for kids. That's just how iconic it is for them. But for a comparison that's a little bit better for us, remember how every time More Than Truth played, you felt something? Then, over time, it started to have this component of emotional damage. I think that if Soken does it justice, and if they go for it, I think the theme of love could basically be Endwalker's counterpart to that, and in that case, I think we're all in a lot of trouble. So the point here is that, like with the events and themes of 3, I think we can look at 4 with an eye towards Endwalker, because thematically, 4 is about love. It's about romantic love, of course, but also of friends and of family. It's also about finding purpose and finding your own redemption. And then on like a plot level, it's about an ancient people making their return from the moon, some of whom wanted to be peaceful, but one of them specifically, who is sealed in the moon, sees the new inhabitants as lesser and wants to take it back by force. That sounds an awful lot to me like the Ascians. At the end of the day, Yoshi P went so far as to say they intentionally held back on FF4 references until Endwalker, and I think it's pretty easy to see why. FF4 is to Endwalker what FF3 was to Shadowbringers, and after playing both of the games recently and seeing how the adaptations worked, I think that's really exciting. But we're still not done. There's Final Fantasy VIII. Lunatic Pandora was a structure in FF8 which thematically bears extreme similarities to the Talafroi Towers, the ones we saw in 5.5. Its function was to induce a lunar cry, which turned the moon red and rained monsters from the moon down to the planet. Much like the Talafroi Towers summoning lunar primals. Also, while we're here, take a look at this. This is the Final Fantasy VIII title screen. Well, obviously, but take a look at how it compares to this. The sky above the recreated Amarot. There's no way that's an accident. Not knowing how much reverence they show to Final Fantasy, there is zero chance that's an accident. And there's still even more. I'd rather not, honestly, but we do need to talk about Final Fantasy II. It's a pretty bad game to actually play in terms of gameplay design, but it's not all that bad, and it's still very relevant. So the key thing here is that the raid series in Endwalker is called Pandemonium. Yeah, that's a fairly common thing. It's the name for Hell from Paradise Lost, but a little bit more poignantly, it's the name of the final zone in FF2. So after his earlier death at the hands of the party, the villainous Emperor returns as the Hell Emperor, raising Pandemonium to the mortal world to enact his reign. Obviously, the party just go there and kill him again, and that's the job done. But at the same time, in the Soul of Rebirth quest, which is added in later versions, characters who died along the way in FF4, they awaken in the afterlife. There, they journey to Araboth, which is the Palace of Heaven, the opposite of Pandemonium, and they discover that the Hell Emperor is just one half of the Emperor. The Light Emperor that they've encountered is also part of the Emperor, and they need to kill him to make sure he stays dead. Now, how is that relevant to Endwalker? Well, Lahabrea is the poster boy for Pandemonium, right? Obviously, he's dead. He got. But his ether dispersed, he's off, he could reform. But the key thing is that Ascians borrow their names from the Evilise Espers from FF12. And Lahabrea, the Esper, is the Abyssal Celebrant and the Scion of Light. He's the polar opposite of Mateus, who's the Scion of Darkness. Now, the fun thing is, they're both connected by the same zodiac sign, Pisces. Now, obviously, laugh away at star signs all you want, but they are a huge part of myth. And there's one part that really stands out. In Hindu, Pisces is called Meena. It's two fish, one who's negative, one who's positive. Together, they form nothingness. In Hindu, it represents the final merging of the individual into the universe and the attaining of nirvana. But in FF14 terms, that is basically what a rejoining is, and that is a ton of thematic similarity that a writer can work with. But the final piece, Pandemonium, Lahabrea, the Emperor from FF2 was called Mateus, the counterpart of Lahabrea, the one who was split in two in Pandemonium after his death. Now, I'm not saying what will happen, but that's a lot of thematic connection for the writers to work with, and if they want to bring it all together, then I have a very good idea how. And to finish on Pandemonium, there's Final Fantasy IX's version of Pandemonium, which is a castle of flesh designed to intern the souls of ancients who are awaiting a chance at rebirth on a new home. Does that sound like any specific group of people we've met? So to recap everything so far then, for Endwalker we've got a powerful new summoner, of course, we've got a Dark Knight turned Paladin, we're going to the moon, there are red towers that create lunar primals, there's an ancient people based on the moon who want their home back, and there's a hell-based palace of flesh full of souls that's possibly related to Lahabrea. So what point am I trying to make here? It's that Final Fantasy XIV is a love letter to the series, absolutely, almost embarrassingly so, but like with Crystal Tower, like with Shadowbringers, like with the things that they took from 3, Endwalker has the potential to take all of the stuff from 4 that thematically lines up with 14 and is really cool and interesting, and actually make something new with it, actually make something special that we're going to love. Because obviously, I played 3 after Shadowbringers and I thought, well, okay, I can see how you've lifted everything else. I see how you've, if you read the plot synopsis, you can see you've just yoinked this game. What are you doing? But the experience of it all is just so much stronger and so much better that I think that knowing what FF4 leans towards doesn't actually make the experience of Endwalker feel like it's going to be worse. If anything, it's almost kind of playing a fun little game of cat and mouse where I'm trying to figure out what they're doing, but I'm also just happy to play the game. I'm happy to play this little subsection of game, which is speculation, which is thinking about it, which is following all these Wikipedia rabbit holes and, spending 30, 40, 50 hours playing Final Fantasy games just to look for specific references. It's all a part of the overall experience, and I'm extremely happy that Shadowbringers did such a great job with 3, and I expect Endwalker to do just the same, if not even better. Now, there's so much more I could have gotten into here, but I think we'll save a little bit of Endwalker speculation just until Michael's caught up and he can really kind of enjoy it with us all together. So I hope you enjoyed this glimpse into lore speculation. This is my first video. I hope you really enjoyed it. Thank you very much, and to pass off, I will just send you back to Michael to say goodbye.
Well, hello, welcome to the outro. I have no idea what you just watched at all. I am just finishing 3.5 and I'm moving on to Stormblood as of the time of doing this. So once I hit Shadowbringers, it will be time to hit this video up so I can fully appreciate all of the franchise history that's going into Endwalker. But regardless, I hope you learned a few things today that have got you excited, that will help you enjoy the game more. Thanks to Matt for, taking the big first step. And yeah, that's it for us. Have a great day. See you next time.